Previously on the top 5, we examined the best volume covers in the series so far. Of course, with anything, if there's a best, there is also a worst, and it would be negligent of me not to shine a spotlight on these less than great efforts. I should say that none of these covers are necessarily bad, they're just what I consider to be the worst. Furthermore, One Piece is a fantastic series, and any element that even begins to let it down is simply not good enough. So let's take a look at these less than stellar efforts. Welcome to the top 5 worst volume covers. Number 5. Volume 65. Alright, so for this first cover, we find ourselves in the Fishman Island arc, which harbours some of the more negative opinions in the series. If there was any time that phenomenal covers were more essential in the series, it was during this arc. And to Oda's credit, there were some great covers, one of which even made the top 5 list. But this is not one of them, or anywhere near one of them. I mean, just what the hell is Luffy doing? He's supposed to be firing off an awesome Red Hawk attack, but instead it looks like he's tripped and fallen. It's a terrible drawing of what was probably a nice conceptual idea, maybe? The new Fishman pirates crowd themselves into the bottom third of the cover, which is a terrible decision. On this cover, they are probably the most interesting aspect. They have their classic trademark individual characteristics, great detail, nice color schemes, but instead 66% of the cover is taken up with Fukaboshi and the top part of Hody Jones's head. Some of the best volume covers in the series manage to flood the space with characters, balancing them whilst allowing them their own personal flair. This cover fails in that by squishing everybody into such a small space, and using the bulk of the space for uninteresting drawings. I mean seriously, Hody's face is so bland that it practically acts as negative space, making the cover feel quite empty and just misused. The best thing about this cover, and the thing that keeps it from delving any further into this list, is the color. I love the general color scheme. Perfectly used shades of yellows and blues with some sparingly used orange and pink. It's great, but it nowhere near makes up for the disaster that is the drawing itself. In any case, let's move on. Number 4. Volume 47. Here we have another cover from an arc that receives a fair bit of criticism, Thriller Bark. This arc also really needed those great covers, and actually, my number 1 best volume pick came from the Thriller Bark arc. But once again, we find ourselves in a state of failure here. The first thing I notice about this cover in comparison with most One Piece covers is that it is quite flat. The color scheme is boring. There's just an overwhelming amount of black and white featuring characters who, let's face it, are not the best designed villains, especially Moria. They don't stand out or have a lot of detail at all. The best part about this cover is probably Luffy in his golden armor, because it's the only thing that stands out from the monochrome mess that covers the rest of the volume. Even the One Piece logo doesn't really pop like it usually does. The black and white rectangular background is simply unpleasant to look at. Combined with the cohort of flat characters, it is just a mess. But while it's a mess, the one thing I can say for this cover is that it isn't boring. There is actually stuff to look at, and we're about to see that that is a very important feature as we move forward. Number 3. Volume 27. Good God, this cover is just boring. We have one of the worst drawings of Luffy, making a winking expression that looks entirely unnatural. I hate the cover based on that alone, but in the background we have an annoyingly uniform group of panels featuring characters of all roughly the same proportions, and all facing pretty much straight on. And the colours are garbage as well. It's so washed out that it removes any sense of adventure or intrigue in the world of Skypiea. Furthermore, the logo once again fades into non-existence with the use of terrible grey. If you watch the top 5 covers video, you'll know that I actually quite like when Oda uses rectangles to separate characters. This is definitely the worst example of that technique, but it does at the very least provide some nice balance and a modicum of aesthetic value. But really, I can only look at this cover for about a second before I get bored. At least volume 47 had things to look at. This cover offers me nothing, and it doesn't make me want to read the contents of the volume. Number 2. Volume 20. So imagine this as a concept. We're going to put Luffy, Smoker, and Crocodile all on the same cover, facing off. That sounds amazing, right? But wait! Let's take all of those characters, put them all at a terrible angle where you can't really see any of them, and stick a giant duck in the focal point of everything. Don't get me wrong, I love Karoo, he's my boy, but what even is this cover? Any tone of seriousness from these powerful characters facing off is ruined by Karoo's face dominating the space. I think this idea might have worked a lot better if Oda had put Vivi in the middle in Karoo's place. It would have made perfect sense as well as add to the atmosphere. I also feel as if not being able to see Crocodile's face is a huge mistake. I mean, I get the face-off of all the factions, but Crocodile is not on equal footing with Cobra, Koza, or even Smoker. He is the big, bad villain of the arc, not that you'd think so from looking at this. And as much as I love shapes on covers, I really don't like the star, or the pattern in the background of it. What I do like are the shadows stalking each figure. They add some much needed depth and interest, but it's not enough, unfortunately. Once again, the colours for this cover are just boring. It's a simple and effective scheme, but it doesn't accentuate anything or generate anything more than a passing interest. One Piece has done so much better on almost every other cover. Every cover except one, that is. Number 1. Volume 63. We're finishing right where we started in the Fishman Island arc. The arc where covers were meant to make or break has managed to produce what is, in my opinion, the worst volume cover this series has ever seen and probably will ever see. It's flat, it's bland, and it somehow does the impossible by making even Zoro look uninteresting. Luffy looks stupid as well, tied up there smiling in a very uncharacteristic-like manner. Then we have the awesome characters that are Otohime and Fisher Tiger on either side of Shirahoshi looking just plain. Especially Otohime. In fact, her expression could almost be teenage fan art. There's no intent or emotion behind that face she's making, which is something that Oda seems to go to great pains to perfect. Fisher Tiger looks slightly better, but for such a figure to be relegated to a squishy space behind Shirahoshi is just a bad decision. Also, his face kind of blends in with her hair, flattening the cover further. And Shirahoshi herself, she's just not the best character. And to put her as the centerpiece of a cover like this just makes the volume wholly unappealing. What I will give her credit for is the detail put into the color and scaling of her lower body, but if that's the best thing that I can say about it, then we know that this cover is in a pretty dire situation. This sort of garbage just doesn't belong with the rest of the One Piece collection, and I think it's going to be pretty difficult to find a cover worse than this in the future. At the very least, I hope it will be difficult. And there you have it, the top 5 worst volume covers. Feel free to comment with your own personal worst covers, and I'll see you next time for another One Piece Top 5.